With the rise of small, compact electric motors, urban mobility has completely changed. And over the years, we've seen some truly wild ideas roll out onto city streets. Today, I want to talk to you about one of the most unusual ones out there, the Speedboard. This thing is basically trying to recreate the feeling of snowboarding, but instead of powdery slopes, you're carving through sidewalks and streets. If the Speedboard sounds familiar, that's probably because it made quite a splash back in 2019. The creator, David Jackson, launched it on Kickstarter, and the campaign didn't just succeed, it doubled its funding goal in about a month. Not long after that, finished boards started showing up in the hands of influencers and riders around the world, which really helped it grab attention early on. What's interesting, though, is that despite all that buzz, the Speedboard's online presence feels surprisingly small. Its Facebook page has only around 1.8K followers, and rider feedback is pretty mixed, with roughly half of users saying they're happy. So that naturally raises some questions about why opinions are so divided, where the project actually stands today, and where it might be heading. Looking at the board itself, there's no denying it's a strange and eye-catching design. It's essentially a skateboard with two large wheels placed near the center, and while it looks wild, it's not entirely unique. Another company, Two Swift Boards, makes something along similar lines, though the shape of the board and the steering system are quite different. On the Two Swift Boards, steering works a bit like a shopping cart wheel. Because of something called negative trail, when you lean into a turn, the board naturally steers itself in that direction. The Speedboard does the same thing in practice, but it gets there using a completely different setup. It relies on two swing arms connected by a central spring, and if you're thinking it looks a little motorcycle-inspired, that's not an accident. David Jackson has a background in bike racing, and you can definitely spot some motorcycle DNA in this electric board. The end result is a steering system that responds directly to your body movement. Lean into a turn, and the front wheel follows that lean, guiding the board where you want it to go. It's definitely not something you master instantly, and yes, there's a learning curve. But once riders get a few sessions under their belt, most of them seem to figure it out fairly quickly. In fact, after a couple of months, some riders are carving around on this thing like total pros. The motorcycle influence doesn't stop at the steering either. Instead of having a motor mounted directly to a wheel, the Speedboard uses a mid-mounted motor that sends power to the rear wheel via a chain. This setup allows it to pack a serious punch. In its most powerful version, and there are 3 different variants, the board can deliver up to 7,000 watts of peak power. That's enough to push it to a top speed of around 35 miles per hour, which is honestly fast enough that I'd strongly recommend more than just a helmet. Pads for your elbows, knees, and back seem like a very smart idea here. When it comes to range, the company claims the Speedboard can travel up to 60 miles on a single charge. According to the product page, that number comes from real-world testing, not just optimistic lab conditions, which is actually pretty impressive for something this compact. One thing that does stand out, though, is the lack of traditional suspension. From what I can tell, comfort mainly comes from the pneumatic tires, and that's about it. In videos, especially one showing a rider cruising through the streets of Bali, you can clearly see that the ride can get pretty rough. This definitely seems like a board that prefers smooth asphalt or clean concrete rather than bumpy or broken roads. Now, about the project itself, the journey hasn't exactly been smooth. After the Kickstarter wrapped up, production slowed down significantly, and backers were left wondering what was going on. For a while, it almost looked like the project had disappeared altogether. But the Speedboard is very real, and according to the official website, you can actually order one right now, with delivery times listed at around 2 weeks. Recent comments on the Kickstarter page also suggest that boards are indeed being delivered, with at least one rider saying they received theirs just a few months ago. As for pricing, the top-tier version, called the Dainily, comes in at around $3,000. On the more affordable end, the Big Bear version starts at about $2,300. There is a small detail worth mentioning, though. When you go to order, you'll notice it still says First Production Run. At checkout, which definitely raises a few questions about availability and long-term support.